It is September 16th, and we are talking about chapter 9 in John. Christ comes across this man who's been blind from birth. He spits in the mud, makes some paste out of the mud, puts it on the guy's eyes, has him go wash it off, and that guy can see. Right? Starts telling everybody, and the Pharisees are like, how can you see? Like, oh, the guy put mud in my eyes, and I wash them off, and I can see. And it's like, I've been blind my whole life, and they're just, everybody's like, how's this happening? And they did it on the Sabbath, right? So they're like, he must be, I don't know, claiming a demon is being possessed by a demon. He's like, no, I don't think that works that way, and you can't be a sinner if he could heal me. How could that happen, right? So they ask his parents, and their parents are like, well, he's been dead, blind. He was born that way, and now he can see. I don't know how he can see. But so they asked him if they believe that Jesus was the Christ, and that's how he healed him. They says, we don't know. Ask my son. He's of age, right? And they did that because they were afraid of him. They were putting people out of the synagogue who didn't believe, and they were scared of him. I'm like, you know what? If you guys are a bunch of want to be a club of ignorant people, be a club of ignorant people. I don't need your synagogue, but that would be me. Okay, so they didn't want to be that way. So then they call this guy in, and he starts testifying of what happened, and they're calling, you've been a sinner since birth. I'm like, how can you? I mean, yeah, we'd be fighting, all right. So they end up putting him out of the synagogue. So Christ hears about that, goes sees the guy, and asks him if he believes in the Son of Man, and he's like, yeah, show me who he is, I'll believe in him. And he's like, well, that's who you're talking to. Okay, so they were just so bent on resisting what was happening with all the miracles and everything, and I see that like right now. I see that there's a financial crisis looming, that there's so many factors that are weighing on it, and it's about to have people are just like la-di-da, everything's good, we don't want to talk about that right now. That's we're having fun, all right? I'm like, what is you're in a coma, all right? So let me lay this out, okay? In all those toxic assets from the 2008 crisis, there's still, many of them are still out there. The banks have houses they haven't foreclosed on. They got people living in these houses that are paying rents that aren't enough to cover the debt on them, but they're keeping them occupied and maintained. They got other houses that are just sitting there vacant, and they're just waiting for the market to come back up so they can then foreclose on them and get their money back and not take such a loss. And they're spread out through all the banks. Deutsche Bank ended up with a lot of them. Okay, and all the banks are connected. All right, and then the other problem with Deutsche, with Germany, with all their social programs with the refugees, that's a big strain on their financial system. And then their auto industry is really dependent on China. Japan's had the same problem. China has switched over to electric cars. And that's really hurting the auto industry in Germany. And in the United States, next year, the big three, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, are all switching to electric. And I know this because my son works for Tesla. He told me this, right? This is what's going on. And that's going to have a huge impact on Texas, because Texas is highly dependent on oil and gas. And they just voted down property tax, which I think is a good thing, but if the oil industry collapses in Texas, that's going to be bad, right? It's going to have a huge impact, right? And they're already tooling up, building new refineries and everything. And if that happens, oil and gas is still going to be needed, because you know what? They got the energy that creates the electricity for the electric cars is still fossil fuel based, right? But it's mostly coal, which would be a big boom for West Virginia and Virginia and Kentucky. But so that's what's happening, right? Now the valley, the food is still a big deal. There's more produce warehouses in the Rio Grande Valley than there is in the whole state of California, all right? And food is in high demand, okay? And so that's a good thing for the valley, all right? The manufacturing of auto parts in Mexico, unless they start retooling for electric, and if they do that, then that could be a boom, right? But these are all these things that are like right there. 2020 is when that, oh yeah, the baby boomers, like 40 million baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964, and half of those are coming to retirement age next year. There's a whole bunch of, there's 28 million of them that don't have enough saved for retirement, and then there's all these unfunded liabilities of state and municipal that's going to wreak real havoc with the economy, all right? And so there is, what's going on in the stock market right now is all these companies are buying back their stock. Okay, and the reason is because of the banking. Now, like 10 years ago, I heard a well-known economist talking about this bifurcation. Okay, so financial advisors used to look for companies, what sector of the market was going to take off, and they would load their customers up in mutual funds full of those companies. Now they can't just do that. They have to look for specific companies that are structured a certain way. They have a good CEO, make smart decisions. They've got a good board of advisors that is good at making decisions and quick, and they've got a good supply chain management. They've got their manufacturing's set up the right way, and their marketing's set up the right way. They got good marketing, right? But the main thing was no debt, because they don't trust the banks. This is 10 years ago. They didn't trust the banks, right? They're looking for companies that had capital, had a lot of reserves, right? That's the ones they would invest in. So these money managers and advisors for the big insurance companies and pension funds, they're basically dictating who's going to make it and who's not. You hearing what I'm saying? And what they're doing is they're getting money. They're in these index funds. They have, that'll mirror like the S&P 500 or the Russell 2000 or whatever market, and that's what they get, all right? And they get protection. They get a floor of 0 to 2%, whatever. So there's no risk. So those index funds have taken a lot of money away from advisors, because the advisors, even with their algorithms, haven't been able to get good returns. They're out at the wrong time, or in at the wrong time. They're in when the market's down, and they're out when the market's up, right? And so the advisors have been really hurt by these index funds, and that's why they badmouth them. You have this one guy that talks about the bubble for index funds, okay? And because, there's a lot of money that's gone toward these index funds, and so the money does get invested, but it gets invested by the guys that know what time it is. These smart money managers and advisors that are putting their money in the right companies. Okay, so there's going to be a period of the big fish eating the little fish. Okay, and these are smart companies and they're going to do away with the way things are done, which means they maybe go to a lot of automation. They're going to be more part-time labor, less full-time jobs, and there's going to be a big change, and it's good. And it's like people are sleeping at the wheel. They're in a coma. They're not paying attention. Nobody's even thinking about it or talking about it. They're talking about impeachment. People are talking about that, right? I'm almost thinking that that's a distraction to keep people from paying attention to what's about to happen, but it's about to happen. Now, I don't think making a run on the banks like Dave Ramsey's talking about, pulling all your money out, I don't think that's the right thing either. Because the banks are actually protecting themselves. The ones that having the problem are the big banks. A lot of toxic assets from 2008 are still out there floating around and on the books for some of these big banks. And there's one guy that had a theory, and I think he's right on, that they're probably in their treasuries. They've got these toxic assets. So Chase is one of the bigger banks, and Chase has always had a history of being conservative. I remember when I was a broker and I was approved with Chase, they never changed their guidelines. It was 80% loan to value, 660 FICO score, 45% debt to income ratio, 3 years expenses in reserve, 3 months expenses in reserves, and 2 years employment history, no gaps, and bam, you got a good loan, 30-year fixed, with the best rates out there. And but they didn't change. They didn't go outside of those guidelines when everybody else was. And then when TARP came in, they did buy Washington Mutual, all right, so they could take advantage of the TARP, which was zero interest money, right? And then they paid it back quick, right? But those assets got bundled and are out there, and Deutsche Bank took a lot of them. Okay, and Deutsche Bank's in trouble because of that. Deutsche Bank's in trouble because the German social programs that the government's in a hawk over, but also because their auto industry's in big trouble because they're the main provider, them in Japan, of automobiles for China, and China's gone completely to electric, and so there's no more production going on with BMW and Mercedes and Porsche. Okay, and then in the United States, now my son works for Tesla, and he's the one who told me this, the big three automakers next year are all going to electric. And that's going to have a huge effect in Texas because we're so dependent on the oil. And they just voted down state property tax. Now, we're not done producing oil because guess what? The electricity that's used to produce, to power these electric cars is still coming from fossil fuels. But it's going to still, gas prices are going to go down, right? But they're still going to need oil. But it's going to have a big effect on the oil and gas production in the state of Texas. Now, in the valley, food is still is high in demand. There's not enough food. And there's more produce warehouses here in the Rio Grande Valley than there is in the whole state of California. And that's going to be good for the valley, okay? But, and then if the maquiladores in Mexico get on the bandwagon and start retooling for electric, that'll be a boom because that's going to be a lot of. So there's a lot of things to consider, but just like the corporations having their house in order, people have to. And every one of these talking heads that's talking about this looming crisis is all saying, pay off your debt, get a budget, have an emergency fund, start saving in tax advantage vehicles for retirement, which means life insurance. Okay, so they're all saying the same thing, all right, and everybody needs to do that, but people need to pay attention. The real people, here in Texas, because all these Californians are coming here to the valley. They Googled the least expensive real estate in the country, and it came up McAllen, Texas, and that's why they moved here. and I'm not kidding. They're everywhere, all right? But there's rules in Texas about, you can only refinance like once a year, and only up to 80% of your purchase price for like the first 3 years, and then only 80% loan to value period. So it's not going to be like it was in California back in the boom. But there's a lot of people coming here because of this, and it's going to change things. The prices are going to go up, and that's going to affect people. So it's an interesting situation that we have here. But people just need to pay attention, all right? And I don't want to talk about that. We're having fun. I'm like, yeah, for now. All right. This is the 16th of November. All right. That's my report. And it's just like, it's what I'm saying. It's just like in the scriptures. They just don't want to hear the truth. They didn't want to hear the truth about Jesus, and they're not want to hear the truth about, they're stuck in their subconscious programming. The way things are, the way they're used to, the status quo. And that's what your subconscious mind does. It keeps you there in the status quo. You have to look to the future. You have to look down the road. You have to plan. That's what gets you out of your subconscious thinking. And Christ, everything in the New Testament, everything Christ is doing and saying is getting you to look forward, look ahead. All right. And that's what this is all about.